speakers and participants. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone watching us live from different parts of the world. Myself is Dr. Montip Sriratana, Director of Digital Belt and Road International Center of Excellence, or we call DIBA ICOE Bangkok, National Research Council of Thailand. And today I will serve as a conference moderator. I'm very obliged to welcome you all to day 2, session 2 of the National Conference on Thailand and the Sustainable Development Goals, Learning and Boosting Implementation Together. The United Nations Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, represents an urgent call to action in a global partnership to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that everyone enjoy peace and prosperity. In session 1 of this conference, we discussed the status of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, learned the major findings from the 2021 Asia Pacific Progress Report on SDGs of the United Nations, or we call in short UNSCAP, as well as from the roadmap of SDGs from various international organizations, private sector network, academia, and civil society organizations. We also discussed an attempt to identify Thailand's priority SDG goals and challenges. In this day 2 session, we will endeavor to identify opportunity and capture lesson, and we'll have discussion to the extent possible and identifying priority data sources and proxies of SDG targets and indicators also. We will wrap up the conference with some conclusions and lessons learned from Thailand, which can be shared regionally and globally. As in session 1, we will be conducting online survey in this session. I kindly request everyone to respond to the survey form, which will be provided in the chat box. Without further ado, I have the great pleasure to introduce and call on Ms. Gemma Van Houdelen, Director of Statistics Division of the UNSCAP, to serve as the moderator for session 2.2 on identifying opportunities and capturing lessons. Gemma, on to you, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montip, and welcome to all of our guests today. It's a real pleasure to be with you again today, and I'd just like to echo Dr. Montip's praise for a really wonderful first session where we brought together a very big audience, over around 150 people from across our region, to learn from what is happening here in Thailand, raise awareness of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and in particular, look at identifying areas where we can boost implementation here in Thailand. My name's Gemma Van Houdelen, the Director of the UNSCAP Statistics Division, and it's a real pleasure to be joining all of you here today at today's second session. Last week in session 1, we focused very much on identifying and raising awareness of the 2030 Agenda and identifying what could be the priority sustainable development goals for Thailand. Today, we're going to move to a second, into a little bit more detail. And as we just heard from Khun Montip, we're going to try and identify where are our priority indicators and data sources so that Thailand can better monitor and follow up and review progress with its commitments to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it's my great pleasure to bring to you in this session a really fantastic panel of speakers who's going to share with us their perspectives on the opportunities that exist for Thailand and share with us some lessons that they've like to capture that we can share regionally and globally, as sharing lessons that Thailand has learned that we can share regionally and globally. We have speakers coming to us today from my own institution, the United Nations. Great pleasure to introduce my colleague from SCAP, as well as from the United Nations Environment Programme. We've got representatives from the government sector, Dr. Totai from the National Economic and Social Development Council, and Ms. Hashanok from the National Statistics Office of Thailand. And then we have representatives from the academic and university sector, Professor Jiao from a member of the DBA, the Digital Belt and Road Science Community, and also Dr. Zhui from the Asian Institute of Technology. So this session, which I'll be moderating over the next hour and a half, is about identifying opportunities and capturing lessons. And as we just heard from Dr. Montip, please, if you have any of your own lessons or any opportunities that you'd like to also share with us, please make use of the chat, and we'll also be making use of the chat to make this an interactive session. So without further ado, let me first introduce Ms. Hashanok, also known as a very good friend of mine, Kun Eun, from the National Statistics Office of Thailand, who's going to be sharing with us their experience as the official statistics organisation on Thailand's lessons and data for follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda. Over to you, Ms. Kun Eun. Thank you very much, Ka.
Thank you, Kun Jema, and good afternoon to all, even good morning and good evening to all. Let me share my slide. Okay. Thank you, Kun Jema, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizer NRCT for inviting NSO Thailand to be part of this session. My name is Hashanok Chipuparawat. I am the Director of Statistical Forecasting Division from the National Statistical Office of Thailand, or NSO Thailand. Today, I'm going to present the Thailand Lesson Learned Big Data for follow-up and review for 2030 Agenda, identify opportunity and capture, learn from follow-up and review. Before I go through the detail, refer to the Open Data Award 2016 and the Desirable of Data Ecosystem for SDG data. It identifies 5 main groups of actors: government agency, the private sector, civil society, academic and research institutes, and the international community. The different groups partly fulfill different tasks within the data ecosystem, some of them by producing data and others by analyzing data or using data for decision-making processes. At the core is the National Statistical System composed of the National Statistical Office and other statistical agencies. Also, the structure of the National Statistical System, or NSS, vary from country to country. It generally includes the NSO, the central bank, other government agencies, and line ministries. Within the National Statistical System, the NSO is mandated to produce official statistics, ensure that official statistics fulfill high quality standard and comply with the fundamental principle of official statistics, and its most key to lead statistical coordination within the NSS. However, the recognize the situation of Thailand National Statistical System, which are too many sources of data collection and could not find the right source, kind of data, for example, duplication, omission, quality, and statistical standard problem, and could not do any analysis or make decision for national policy, population, and for urgent crisis. User confusion, coordination problem. Due to data are not being integrated and linked. To do so, the 2007 Statistical Act is to empower NSO to do better coordination roles for effective management of national statistical system with clear role, function, and relation of various agencies in the national statistical system, and expect the statistical data of government organizations will be linked and use integrated, so that we will the NSS or National Statistical System in Thailand. We have like two statistical master plan. Next, for the activity in related to the lesson learned of the 2030 agenda for SDG. The activity in 2016 to 2019 related to national follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Thailand committee, I'm sorry, before Thailand committees on sustainable development was set zero on 2018. We have like 5 main activities. The first one is mapping global SDG indicator with official statistics, that we have 34 indicators were met, and integrated global SDG indicator to national strategy for the development of statistics. And second, development of data assessment mechanism and did the initial assessment of the coherence between the national indicator and 241 global SDG indicator in that time. And we set up the 4 workshops on national indicator framework in order to engage data producer, data user, and stakeholder, including government agency, the private sector, civil society, and academic and research institute to discuss and define SDG Thailand context, SDG global and national targets, and then we will come up with SDG indicator that includes the global indicator, proxy indicator, and additional indicator for Thailand context. And then on April 2019, we have a set of national SDG indicator. Then the advocacy SDG indicator at national and provincial level. Last, that activity come up before set zero, statistical coordination between custodian agency and national agency. This slide shows the SDG indicator framework, that you can see that the left side is nationalized from the global SDG indicator to national SDG indicator, and we define national SDG framework and asset a variety of data and indicator. And then we localize national SDG indicator to provincial SDG indicator. You can see the localize from the global indicator. We localize to the national level, that also have global indicator, proxy indicator, and additional indicator in Thai context. And then localize to the provincial level, consists of the national indicator. This is a core set in which every province, 76 province, should have the same set of indicator. And then in each province, they can add the additional indicator in the provincial context. This is the data availability assessment in 2016 to 2017. In that time, we have like 2,401 global SDG indicator, but for the Thai SDG indicator, 120 indicators are readily available, and 42 indicators are partially available. 18 indicators could be replaced by proxy indicator, and 6 indicators are not relevant to national context, and 55 indicators no metadata provided from interagency expertise group of SDG and relevant agency have not proposed proxy indicator. That is the activity before the set zero of the Committee on Sustainable Development. So after the setting the Committee on SDG, uh, on 2019. And the activity in 2020 to 2021 related to national follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The first one is revise the responsibility agency for each goal, target, and indicator by the NESDC, and then align and integrated SDG indicator into 20 national strategy plan, develop monitoring and evaluating platform, and NESDC, Ministry of Interior and National Statistical Office. We are working to localize SDG indicator by development SDG indicator at local level, and then UNICEF Thailand, NSO, and NESDC, we will do the thematic report on child-related SDG indicator, and we will develop the SDG gateway with SDMX standard or statistical data and metadata exchange, and which is NSO has been supported by UNSD and UNSCAP, also UNICEF, related to the SDMX tool. So we have the project on the data catalog for the NSO and related agency. Because of all the agency under the National Statistical System have to make data more open, transparent, and accessible by government data catalog project. In order to enhance the NSS, data should be more accessible and sharing. We developed the government data catalog aim to improve the quality and efficiency of public services delivery. After the government data catalog and agency data catalog are ready for sharing and exchange, data and statistics includes official statistics will be used more widely and use of OS in measuring and monitoring SDG. And next, for the activity in this year, it expands statistical coordination to implement SDG indicator, and last, SDG dashboard. We have a question that how far are we from achieving the SDG, the national level, the regional level, or the global level? I can show the example from the ASEAN community. The ASEAN community, they also have the ASEAN SDG indicator. All 10 member states are working together on ASEAN SDG indicator as a working group on the SDG indicator under the ASEAN Community on Statistical System Committee. So I will show the example on the goal number 1 on the indicator. Proportion of population living below the national poverty line in ASEAN. Thailand has achieved the MDG target on poverty and hunger, reducing the number of people living in poverty and hunger by half. However, poverty remains in many manifestations and inequalities persist. Around 7.2% of population live under the national poverty line. The number could reach 15.5% if we include those who are slightly above the line. The government has started a legislation stream to provide support to the poor. In 2016, 17,469 billion baht was provided to 7.5 million registered low-income earners through the national e-payment system to further support their livelihood. It is expected that stream will benefit around 12 million qualified registrants in 2017. I would like to show all, but the time has limited, so I will skip to the last slide. For the challenge, for the evaluating and monitoring of SDG. The first one, data issue and the timeline is disaggregation and methodological issue. The timeline is some of the information, for example, the the data or the statistics from the census, even the population and housing census, agricultural census, or the industrial census are updated after 10 or 5 years. And second data issue is disaggregation. This is going to be a major issue, especially at the sub-national level, provincial level, or the local administrative,อบต อบจ or องค์กรปกครองส่วนท้องถิ่น the local administrative. And then methodological issue, unclear methodological and concept for some indicator. The clarify of the metadata and definition in the Thai context, such as urbanization, social protection, or new data source and new techniques. Second, multiple systems for follow-up and monitoring evaluation. And third, mobilization of financial resources to fill data gaps. And last, for our Thailand for challenge, inadequate, decentralized, and localization of national priorities. That is all my presentation. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you very much, Kunun. That's excellent presentation. And as you can see from the National Statistics Office of Thailand, they've really embraced the need to have a comprehensive data ecosystem for monitoring and follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda. And they're starting a new initiative there called a data catalogue to try and understand and catalogue all the data sources in Thailand that are not only available for, that could be used for monitoring the 2030 agenda, but also the strong link there to the 20th National Strategy, National Strategic Plan of Thailand. So thank you very much, Kunun. That was excellent presentation this afternoon. I'd now like to turn to my colleague from UNSCAP, Mr. Arman Bagnia. Sorry, Arman, I'm very good on your surname. And Arman is going to share with us not only some insights on Thailand, but also share with you some examples from across the Asia region on using SDG indicators at the national level. Over to you. Thank you very much, Arman.
Thank you, Gemma. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. It's an honor to be with you here today. I'm trying to share my screen. I think you need to stop sharing. Yes, thank you. So today, my presentation will focus on two things, basically. One is I'm trying to share with you a few examples of developing national indicator frameworks in a few countries in our region. And also I will share a few examples of the data tools available which can be used for dissemination and analysis of SDG data. But I would like to start from where Gemma ended on data availability and data SDG data in Thailand. As you can see on the right side, the donut graph shows basically that Thailand has sufficient data on 130 indicators, almost more than half of the indicators, global SDG indicators that can be used for SDG analysis. And on the left side, you can see the distribution of the availability across all 17 goals. And the graph shows basically that even though there are goals with less data than others, but still you can see that across all goals, there are some indicators, at least in every goal, that shows us, can be used to show us basically where we are and where we are heading in relation to our 2030 targets in Thailand. And this slide shows the data availability across all countries in the region. Of course, I couldn't fit in all countries, but as you can see, it ranges from 10% availability up to 57% data availability in Asia Pacific. And Thailand, as you can see, stands at the top, is one of the countries with maximum data availability on the SDGs. So situation is not that bad. Of course, half glass is empty still, and that's why we're here to discuss how to fill those gaps. And here I'm going to share with you 3 examples from Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, and the Philippines in our region, how they have tried to basically tackle this issue and develop their own national framework. So let's look at Kyrgyzstan first. In Kyrgyzstan, they have identified 30 out of 244 indicators not relevant to their context, and they have added 59 indicators to global indicators. So altogether, they have a framework including 271 in total indicators that they are going to use for the national monitoring, out of which 114 indicators, which are all global indicators, they have no data, and they're trying to, of course, fill in those gaps. But for 100 global indicators, they have data. And on the left side, you can see the distribution of these indicators by goal. And you see that the blue part of each bar shows the indicators that are being introduced as national indicators, or proxy indicators, if you like, across different goals. And you see that for some of the goals where basically they have less indicators available, they have tried to fill that with more proxy indicators. And across all 17, for most of the goals, they have found a few indicators that they didn't identify as relevant to their country context. And of course, goal 14 is an ocean. And for Kyrgyzstan, being a landlocked country, they find entire goal not relevant. They have developed a very interesting dissemination platform. They have adopted. I've provided the link here for you, and they have. I'll show you a bit of the platform here. It is based on a technology called Open SDG, which is developed by a few national statistical systems of few countries together, jointly developed it. And Kyrgyzstan has adopted this to disseminate their data. And you can see they have designed it by all 17 goals, and they have a very nice design of their own national style. If you go into any of those goals, they have all data available for their countries, including the new indicators. For example, on goal 2, they have listed all targets here and all indicators. And you can see that, for instance, indicators with data available for Kyrgyzstan are identified with different type of label. Indicators without data are also listed there, but they're identified with no data. That is, it says exploring data sources, meaning that they're still in the process of producing those data. They have identified one indicator here that is not applicable to the country. And also they have added one national indicator, which is consumer price index here, which is not part of the global SDG, but they have added to their list. If you click on each of those indicators, you can see the visualization of the data, and also a table of data, as well as national metadata for indicators. So this is a tool available to all countries, and it's easy to adopt, and it's a very, very good dissemination tool for SDG data. When I look at the all national indicators adopted by Kyrgyzstan, they are of 3 different types. One type of indicators are those that are have different definition at the national level. For instance, they have global indicator, which is proportion of population below national poverty line, which is available from World Bank. But Kyrgyzstan, they have their own, they have a different definition of poverty line than what is being used with the international agencies, and they call it official poverty line, and they have used that indicator as a proxy. Or indicators could be a different variant of the same indicator. For instance, a global indicator, which is protection, population covered by social protection. They have added a national indicator here, which is share of officially registered unemployed, which is a subpopulation, which they wanted to highlight there. So they have added that indicator. Or it could be also that they have a completely new indicator, like this one under goal 9, they have added pollutants emitted by stationary source per square kilometer. And this is a completely new indicator, and they have data for it, so they want to use it under goal 9 to measure a different aspect of target 9.4. So the point here in this slide is that we need to have a strategy when we add our national indicators, and there are different types of indicators that you could adopt here. A different country that I want to highlight is Armenia. Again, I put the link to their website here. They have adopted the same technology, OpenSDG, and very similar website. I'm not going to go to that one here for the sake of time, but you can do it yourself later. But here, the national indicators adopted by Armenia, they have a different strategy. They did not find any global indicator not relevant. So basically, they have adopted all 244 indicators for Armenia, but they have added 77 national indicators here. And again, you see the distribution here on the left side across all 17 goals, except one goal, which is goal 13. They have added, and goal 9, they have added national indicators to every other goal. But you can see that, for instance, I have highlighted these 4 goals. Even after adding national indicators, you can still see that those are the goals that indicators are not, the evidence is not strong enough there, basically. Still, there's a lots of gap to be filled. And of course, goal 14, I should have also highlighted that one. Another country, again, was developed a national indicator framework is Philippines. They have 155 indicators, out of which only 102 indicators are from the global database. Basically, they have not used more than half of the global indicators. And they have added 53 national indicators. Here, their strategy is that they have 2 different types of national indicators. One type is proxy indicator, meaning that they are replacing a global indicator with a new indicator. Another indicator, another one type is supplemental indicators, which is basically they are using the global plus they are adding another aspect by a new national indicator. Now, when it comes to different data technologies or platforms, countries often ask this question of which one is the best, which one we have to use. If you already have one, can we use other? Here I try to explain that 3 different levels at which you can adopt different data technologies. One is for data management purposes, which is basically your data infrastructure is established. Another one is at the dissemination, which I already showed one example. And on top of those is data analysis, which the SDG dashboards are one type of those data analysis platforms. I'll give an example for each. For instance, for data management, a community of statistical institutes have developed, led by OECD here, developed a DataStat suite here. which actually Thailand has already adopted. And it is based on SDMX, data and metadata exchange technology. And it is a very good tool to basically establish a national data center and managing your data. When you have that, on top of that, you could adopt new technologies such as OpenSDG that I just gave an example of Kyrgyzstan to disseminate your data on the SDGs. And when you have that, you can also think about different analytical tools that you could build on top of those platforms. One example is the National SDG Tracker, which is launched recently by SCAP. And the idea for the tracker is to enable countries to use their data that is disseminated on their Explorer or on OpenSDG to analyze and better understand where we are with the SDGs. So how it works basically in Tracker, as you can see here on the left side, on the left panel, every country has access to all SDG indicators. And for each of the indicators, you can see on the right panel, you have access to your data points from the global database. If you don't want to use this indicator, you can disable it from analysis, like those indicators that you don't find relevant. If you wanted to edit data points or add data points, you can edit this table, or you can add disaggregation, or you can add proxy indicators under each of those targets. And after you have done all of your data editing, it will produce a snapshot or a dashboard at all levels of goal, target, and an indicator, which you can basically plug into your platforms or to your reports. So this is also available to all countries, of course, including Thailand, the same way that OpenSDG is available. And SCAP has already started a dialogue with Thai government through our colleagues at UN Country Team and Resident Coordinator Office, and we're happy to continue that and support Thailand, whichever tool that they have selected. You can access this tool through Asia Pacific SDG Gateway by scanning this QR code. Thank you. Over to you, Gemma.
Thank you very much, Arman, and thank you very much for sharing those examples from across our region, Philippines, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan. I'm really particularly pleased that you shared those experiences, because some of the questions that we've been asked from across the region is does a country have to adopt all of the global indicators? And as we saw there from those 4 countries, plus Thailand National Stats Office, countries are really only adopting those global SDG indicators that are relevant to them. And then the other question we get asked is, can the indicators be supplemented? And in the case of Philippines, we just heard that they have supplemented the indicators. And then in some cases, we're being asked, can proxy indicators be used? And as we saw in all of those presentations, as well as the Thai National Statistics Office, the use of proxy indicators for the global indicator framework is the experience of all 4 of those. So thank you so much for sharing that, the experience from across our region, Armand. I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Lud Coppens, who is the head of the SDG and Environment Statistics Unit in the Science Division of the UN Environment Programme. And if many of you recall from our first session, as well as from the presentation just shared there by Arman at UNESCAP, data availability for the global environmental goals is a challenge. And we also heard that the environmental goals for our planet are some of the priority goals that were identified, particularly by the private sector in our first session. So it's my great pleasure to have Lud here with us tonight from the UN Environment Programme, who's going to share with us some insights on SDG indicators and data to monitor progress and inform policy. Thank you so much, Lud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to share my screen, but I can't. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Let me do that.
And we can hear you well.
It's already good. Okay.
And
can you see my screen?
yes, that's wonderful. And we can hear you well. Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you all. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today and to participate in this national conference that Thailand is organizing on sustainable development goals. So I don't think I need to go in much detail here. We all know that environmental measurement is important from different perspectives. But one thing I may want to mention is that from a socio-economic perspective, we know that currently the bulk of official statistics is more about economy and society, and that comparatively much less is known about the planet's natural resources and ecosystems. And closing that gap is quite important because it will give us a better appreciation of the role played by the environment in ensuring human well-being. So this slide basically is an exercise we did now for the second time, where we look at 92 SDG indicators, which were identified as most relevant to the environmental dimension of the SDGs. And so this was presented to the Committee of Permanent Representatives in Nairobi. And what we see between December 2018 and July 2020, that there are more indicators with sufficient data for analysis. So 42% has now enough data to allow us to look at a trend. We see a similar percentage for Thailand, or actually a larger target, a larger number of indicators with sufficient data for analysis, which is 53%. And this is, the difference has also to do with, of course, at a global level, you look at an aggregate and you need enough countries to be able for an indicator to give the global data. So what we can take from this, and you will see that on the World Environment Situation Room, these scorecards are available for these 92 SDG indicators for each country and can be visited there. So, but of course, the main conclusion is that there are big vital data gaps, and they refer to the compilation, analysis, compilation, analysis, and effective use of data, which highlights the underlying data sparsity for the environmental dimension of the SDGs. And it's not only in the underlying data, but it's also in the tools and analytical methodologies for understanding the state of the environment. And moreover, we need to get an insight in the interactions between that environmental dimension of the SDGs and between environmental dimension and social and economic dimensions. And that is because, you know, the resources and the ecosystem services that are provided basically support the social and economic pillars, and basically are until now not really considered when we look at GDP or at the capital of a country. So yes, there is a need to address the data gaps, and that in itself has many challenges, but also opportunities. Big Earth data, Thailand does apply Big Earth data in support of sustainable development goals, as do many other countries. For example, China, through the Big Earth Data Science Engineering Program, is similarly exploring ways of converting Big Earth data into SDG indicators. Similarly, for example, the European Commission has started with Destination Earth, which is an initiative that proposes the development of a very high precision digital model of the Earth based on Earth observations to monitor natural and human activities. Another big potential is provided by citizen science. So that's the practice of voluntary public participation in scientific research and knowledge production. And that offers another approach that could help address some of the data gaps for SDG indicators. And a recent study has shown that citizen science data are already contributing or could contribute to the monitoring of 1/3 of the SDG indicators. And the greatest input from citizen science data to SDG monitoring would be in the environmental SDG indicators, covering areas as biodiversity, water and air quality, and forestry. And that's particularly important because we have a high proportion of environmental SDG indicators that lack data. And so there are some recommendations to realize this untapped potential of citizen science data for SDG monitoring and reporting. And they have been formulated, and initiatives such as the We Observe SDGs and Citizen Science Community of Practice could bring key stakeholders together to address these recommendations. Apart from that, there are technological innovations. The advent of big data have enabled the development of new tools and methodologies for data production. And advances have been made possible, especially to use advanced algorithms and other tools that mine new opportunities that are presented by artificial intelligence. Of course, the use of proxy indicators is also very important, as it can provide information on a particular aspect, be it social, environmental, or economic, to assess the same contextual aspect as intended by the given indicator for which the data is not available. I think at the basis is that the principles for a proxy indicator remain the same. So they should be relevant, accepted, credible, easy, robust, from reliable, trusted data sources. So let me go now into some examples, which I think show how these data can be used. And here we have SDG indicator 1411B, which is the plastic debris density. So on the level 1, the indicator is informed by satellite-based global data products. So satellite images are used to assess plastic in the water column, And remote sensing is also used basically for the larger elements of more than 10 meters and under good atmospheric conditions. So there are always some limitations to the use of these technologies. Similarly, for beach litter, the beach litter that originates from national land-based sources, there the indicator is based on a model, the Ocean Parcels version 2 marine litter model, that estimates where plastics found on the coast likely originated from, and it uses outputs from ocean circulation models to create a particle tracking simulation. It's also true that as a custodian agency, national data are often collected through other organizations to avoid the duplication of the reporting burden. In this case, through the regional seas programs. And then the global data is collected through the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the GeoBlue Planet, and the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Ad Hoc and Open-Ended Expert Group on Marine Litter. So let me go to beach litter. Both satellite data and beach litter are proxies that can inform on the extent and flow of ocean pollution. And beach litter is actually a core proxy indicator for estimating marine plastic debris. So it's the most commonly available at the national level, and national beach cleanup campaigns help to engage the public in the management of marine pollution, and they play an important part on beach litter monitoring. What we also do in many cases is that because of the complexity of the environmental measurement, often a progressive methodology is proposed where it promotes country-derived data collection, but then complemented by other globally available data sets, such as publicly available satellite remote sensing products, and that can be used as proxy indicators. And this is an example of the coastal eutrophication indicator. Also for SDG indicator 661, which is the change in the extent of water-related ecosystems over time, there are many national and international challenges because many countries lack the capacity to effectively measure the spatial extent of health of water-related ecosystems. And the Ramsar sites are actually not a good proxy because only areas that are protected are captured, and the data is not sensitive to changes in ecosystem extent because countries are unlikely to stop protecting part of an area, even if in that part the wetland is lost. And also that information is often not comparable across countries. So here we have online the Freshwater Ecosystems Explorer. It's a free and easy way, easy to use data platform that provides accurate, up-to-date, high-resolution geospatial data depicting the extent of freshwater ecosystem change over time. And so here on the screen, what you see is the page for Thailand. And so it hopes to help decision makers understand dynamic ecosystem changes. The data presented is open access platform, and it's intended to drive action to protect and restore freshwater ecosystems and to enable countries to track progress towards the achievement of the target 6.6. The data can be visualized, downloaded at national, subnational, and basin level, which is interesting if we are talking about disaggregated data, which was mentioned at the beginning. And it's available for permanent and seasonal surface waters, reservoirs, wetlands, mangroves, and water quality. And so all the statistics on this side are produced in accordance with the sorry, I had my timer and I don't know. So all statistics on this site are produced in accordance with the SDG indicator 661 monitoring methodology, and that's designated as a tier 1 indicator by the interagency expert group. So this is a last example. I won't go into detail, but this is a hotspot analysis tool for sustainable consumption and production. And it provides 3 modules. Module 1 provides the country profile, but I think of interest might be module 3, which is the national data system, and that provides the option of inserting national data to receive more tailored results. And so the focus is very much on material footprint. So with that, I'll stop because my time is up. But I think actually these are very interesting times for any professional. And I think the challenge is, of course, to be aware of all these quickly evolving developments and identify what is useful, but also to contribute and to make sure that your voice is heard and that you provide feedback so that these tools that are developed in partnership with many different organizations are actually useful for the monitoring of the 2030 agenda by countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lyd, and thank you very much for sharing with us there the perspective from UN Environment Programme. And I also echo your comments there about the importance of having your voice heard, particularly in these regional and global initiatives. Lyd mentioned there that there's a group called the Interagency and Expert Group on SDG indicators, which has representation from across the globe. And it's there where countries can speak directly to custodians such as UN Environment Programme around the challenges that they face with the official SDG indicators, and also can benefit from the production of tools like we just saw there, the hotspot mapping. So I'm now going to turn to our third speaker. So we've so far heard from Kun Eun from the Taiwan National Stats Office. We've then heard from 2 colleagues from the United Nations system, and we're now going to hear from the Digital Belt and Road Science Committee, sorry. And it's really my great pleasure to introduce Professor Gunso Jia from the START Regional Centre for Asia Pacific, and who is a member of the Digital Belt and Road Science Committee. Dr. Jia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So can I share my screen? I guess here. There you go.
Certainly, and we can hear and see you well. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Monty, for inviting me here. This is a little bit more details from, if you remember, the day one remark from Professor Guo Hadong. Let's talk about CAS-Earth program and its contribution to SDG assessment. So first is two terms, big Earth data. It's more than just subset of big data. It is a georeference and spatially linked. And this reflects every aspect of Earth system structure, function, and the dynamics. So that's the big Earth data. And the CAS-Earth is a science program initiated by CAS and is ran for 5 years. The full name is Big Earth Data Science Engineering. It's try to build a cloud-based digital Earth or virtual Earth system that consists biosphere, ocean, cryosphere, atmosphere, and integrated regional subsystem. Of course, also the human dimension. So here I want to talk in 3 parts. One is where is CAS-Earth from? Talk about challenges and opportunities. And what is CAS-Earth? And where is CAS-Earth going? So first, challenges. There are 3 issues that make the CAS-Earth program alive. One is we have a common challenges, and we have a bigger data flow, a lot of data, and still build up more. There's a barrier to share. There's a problem of compatibility. So for the demand, the Earth system and the global change, there's a big demand for systematic thinking and a really big Earth data to support. So we need a macro policy support, especially SDGs and the global level, regional level, and national level. And good opportunity, good news is that we now have opportunity. We have a very advanced technology now in terms of supercomputing, cloud computing, digital Earth, AI, and citizen science. So we're now able to do so. So think about where we are. We have a common planet, and this world is interconnected. And they have a very complicated spatial gradients and heterogeneity. They are teleconnected and with coupling among spheres. So CAS-Earth is a big Earth data-driven science and policy program. Here's the structure of this program. It's go beyond the satellite data as using the statistical data, airborne, satellite navigation, and the field data and the citizen science data. So all of this built into big data and cloud service platform, and it's called CAS-Earth platform. They including different spheres, including the biosphere, ecosystem, and the cryosphere, ocean, and the land. They also have 2 regional initiative. One is, we can call it regional subsystem. One is China. We call it beautiful China. Actually, it's called like more sustainable China. And digital Silk Road, that is a Belt Road. So Motif already mentioned that. So this China and the Silk Road region, those are 2. So for this program, we're trying to advance in 4 parts. One is the technical innovation, and the second one is scientific discovery. We try to get a whole new innovation of the way to discover the Earth system. And decision making, especially targeting SDGs and the knowledge dissemination. So here are some numbers for this program. This is 5 year, and looks like CAS already talking about to extend to another 5 years after this first 5 years. And there are 31 CAS institutes involved, about 140 level 4 sub-project. There are level 1, 2, 3, 4. So over 1,200 investigators involved, and this very busy mode. We often that have a weekend work, and people just keep busy meeting and working. Here, the key outcome of this program is data. So now we already put the data online for 3 years, and now we have shared data about the 8 BP, over 40 years of satellite time series, and about 4 million scenes of satellite images. And later I will show you the website, and about 4.6 BP of biodiversity data, and 2.8 BP of different remote sensing data, and 0.6 BP of ground GIS data, atmospheric data, and ocean data, and all the other, and plus a lot of biological records. So we expect to end about 3 BP each year in coming years. This is a data portal, and if you have a /en, that will be English version. First, we try to use this program to really understand some big picture science questions over the Earth system. So here are some examples. First one, how do food, energy, water over megacities interlinked under climate change and urbanization? Do snow and ice and ecosystems over Arctic, Antarctic, and higher Asia change in the same way or opposite? What are the trade-offs and the synergies of land-based climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts? And how atmosphere, land, and ocean process are interconnected during the ENSO episode. So those are just some examples that link those different components of this program. Here just show that where we are now. On the bottom is our on-site CAS Earth system, physically located in CAS headquarters, and busily visited by students and scientists. So this is a 360-degree room, and with a lot of screen and different showing the different components and different spheres. And on the upper left is how the system, online system work. You can click in one port or just draw a polygon rectangle to do analyze in different components. And the upper right is online system. Here is the website, so you can log into and download and surf in the data. Let's see, screen is, okay, here are some, let's see how to move this. Oh, here, okay. So start from this year, we're doing several integrated studies over various regions. And one of those case integrated study is over Southeast Asia. I serve as PI of this integrated. That including 14 level 4 sub-projects, and we try to serve SDG goals of 2, 6, 7, 11, 13, 14, 15, and hopefully 17. And the focus is the climate change, disaster risks, food security, urbanization, coastal, and biodiversity, and try to think about their integration and connection. Here are two examples. One is the rice cultivation modes change over Southeast Asia from last 20 years and targeting 2.4.1. And on the right is about spatial temporal patterns of forests and plantations over Southeast Asia in the past 5 years. And this is another example, targeting the SDG 13, all the way from the long-term climate change to extreme climate event, including drought and heat wave over South Asia, East Asia, and also the near real-term monitoring of hurricane for the region. And also the weather forecast system now is, we're collaborating with an ARCT to improve this performance of Southeast Asia. And then bigger data for SDGs, that's the major objectives of this program. And since 2019, we have released 2 SDG reports that covers 6 SDG goals, including 2, 6, 11, 13, 14, and 15, and mostly focused on tier 2. And those are some outcome of this program. And those are the 2 to the right. You see that 2 years of SDG report and being formally released in the UN SDG conference. And on the upper left is, you probably know that UN website that released the data. And CASERS is one of the partners over there. And we also contribute to 2 UNEP reports, GEO6, and recently released the Measuring Progress, Nature and SDGs report, just released last week. And finally, a look into the future. Bigger data science engineering now is evolving into year 4, and it's becoming a new engine for conducting Earth system science, and will continue to serve open science and try to provide a platform for interdisciplinary research for macro scientific discovery of Earth system. And one new development is already decided to build international center for bigger data in supporting SDGs. It will be formally launched in early September in Beijing. And we are trying to seek partnership and correlation over the globe, especially over Southeast Asia and the East Asia region, and to work together, even build a sub-center. So I will leave here, and this is some issues and open for discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Professor Jiao. And yes, it's really fantastic work that you've done there at CASA, the work and the cataloguing of where Big Earth data can be used for the SDGs. It's really a fantastic knowledge product, and we share it a lot here at ESCAP with our partners across the region. So thank you very much for bringing us further insights today, as well as from the opening session last week. And good luck with the launch of your Big Earth International Centre in September. Good luck with that. I'd now like to move to our 5th speaker, Dr. Tatai, the Director of International Strategy and Coordination at the National Economic and Social Development Council of Thailand, who's also spoke to us in session 1, but today he's going to bring us further insights into Thailand's progress with the 2030 agenda during this time of Decade of Action. Dr. Tatai, over to you. Lovely to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kun Gemma. It's nice to hear you again. I would like to share my screen at the moment, please. Okay. 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 Thank you very much again for inviting me to join this session. It's my pleasure to be here, and it's quite interesting to hear all the honorable speakers that mentioned about the data and also about the information that we need to capture about the lessons, about the progress of the SDGs, not just only in Thailand but all over the world. And so when I accept the invitation to join this panel, it's something like it asks me that what should we do for the next? Because you say that you want to know about the opportunities, you want to know about the lessons that we can capture from the previous 5 years. So let me start with the first one that the Thailand, for the Thai government, think about. The first thing is like we ask ourselves that where are we at the moment? We can see from this slide that we know that we already end about the MDGs that's introduced by the UN as well. And so we spent the last 5 years, 2016, 2020s, in establishing the mechanisms to drive the countries towards the SDGs or towards the 2030s Sustainable Development Agenda. So that's what we have done for the first 5 years. We spent time in establishing or doing something like the structural reform for the SDGs, because we need our countries to have the strong institutions to do this. So that is about the first 5 years. So at the moment, we will have 10 more years to go. That the UN say that is kind of the decade of actions. That's why we say that from 2021, this year, to 2030, Thailand will get the countries toward the sustainable development. But you know, some of you might know that at the moment, SDG is not everything for the countries, because we also need to think about our national context. So we have the national strategies, that is our 20 years development plan. So we have to integrate the national strategies, 20 years national strategies, and the SDG altogether, because we don't want to confuse anyone that we're gonna do the 2 development frameworks. We don't want to confuse anyone that we're gonna do the long-term plans and the SDGs, because when we analyze these altogether, these 2 things are the same. We share the same target, because we want the countries, we want the economies to be sustainable. That's why we say that we need to initiate a roadmap for the SDGs. That for the next slide, because I don't want to spend too much time on this, because if you can remember from the last sessions, I have already mentioned about the roadmap for the Thailand SDG implementations. And we say that the National Committees on Sustainable Development approved this roadmap already in 2019, last 2 years. And so there are 6 dimensions for the roadmap to drive the countries toward the SDGs. The first one is the awareness raising, because when you know that when we go to not just in the Bangkok, but when you go to other provinces or any like the local areas, when you ask the people that what is the SDGs, some of them might know, but most of them might not know. So the first thing we need to do is to raise the awareness amongst the people. That's our first dimensions of the roadmap, because we need the SDGs is a part of their everyday life. So the first one is to do the awareness raising. Not just the governments, we ask all sectors in the countries to do this together. The governments, the public sectors, the public agencies, private sectors, the CSOs, the academics, institutes, or whatever. And also the international organizations as the UN and the World Bank. We ask all of them to do all together to raise awareness. Don't need to rely on any SDGs. Don't need to rely on the National Committee on the Sustainable Development. You can do by yourself, and that is the first thing. And the second one, we say that we need to integrate the SDGs into the all level of the plans. That we have this. You can see from the left-hand side. On the left-hand side is the 6 strategies, 6 main strategies of the national strategies, 20-year national strategies. So we mapped altogether the national strategies and the SDGs. When you see this is the mapping that we use for our reference, and you can use for your reference as well. And so when you see the full circle, it means like it's the direct relevance. When you see the half circle, it means like the moderate link. But when you see just like the radius, it's something like the partial links. So, but if you can't see anything, that it means like it has no link altogether. That we map this altogether. Not just this, but because like you know that the national strategy is the first level of the national development plan. The second level of the national development plan is the master plans. We have 23 master plans on specific issues. So that's why we also map together the master plans on the specific issues together with the SDGs. And we can have this map as well. That's why I have to show this picture to you guys, because I just want you to know that it's not just the concept that we say that these two things are the same, are similar, because we consider this already. And we consider this already, we analyze this already, and we know that these two things are quite similar, and we can drive them all together in this decade of action. That the second dimension of the awareness of the roadmap. The third one, we say that is about the institutional coordinations, that we construct the National Committee on the SDGs. We construct the committees, 4 subcommittees to drive the SDG into actions. That's why we mentioned this in the third dimension of the roadmap. And the fourth one is the SDG implementations, because when we consider the SDGs, SDG is the goal. That you know that is the goal, sustainable development goal. Because when you want to achieve the goal, you have to get the success factor to drive them into the goal. That's why we say that the fourth dimension is about the SDG implementation things. We need to find out that what are the key success factors of each goal, of each target. And if we know that what are the key success factors, we can stimulate, we can strengthen the key success factors, because we need to drive them into the actions. And another part of this, the fourth dimension of the roadmap, is about the SDG localizations. Some of you might have heard Mr. Reno last week, because like he mentioned a lot about the SDG localizations. Yes, NSDC altogether with the Ministry of Interior and the National Statistical Office, that we work closely altogether to make this not just the national level, but we aim to implement the SDG in the provincial level and also in the local authorities across the countries. And the fifth one is the partnership. We need it. The SDG 17 and others. We need a partnership from our sectors. And the last one is the monitoring and evaluations, because we are now in the time of the designs about the system. Because some of you might heard, if you are living in Thailand, or if you have heard about the M&E, National M&E system that we call immense. We try to use just only one system, one M&E system, to capture the progress of the national strategies and the progress of the SDGs. We are now in the process of planning and designing the system, and we aim to use this system in the next 2 years. And because like we know that we don't want any government agencies to confused about the M&E system. That's why we say that if you do just 1 or 2 projects, you can just report back to the central agencies about the progress of that project, about the outcome of that project, or the output, or impact, or effect, or whatever. And you have to report that into just only one system. That is the M&E things that we need to do in the roadmap. And that is the things about the SDG, Thailand SDG roadmap. Now come to the questions that this session asks me about, that what are the opportunities and what are the lessons that we can capture from the previous 5 years. I have learned a lot. And now I just want to propose to you that now in the next 2 years, we're gonna have the 13 development plans, or we call that 13 national economic and social development plans. That is what we have think about, that what we are thinking about, because like you know that in the futures, we need to capture about the risks that you say, the pandemics, or anything like the trends, the mega trends, like the aging societies, and anything like the poverty that might be the reward trends from the pandemic, everything like this. And so if you ask me about that, what should we do for the next for the next 10 years, I'm gonna tell you that we should do the things that towards the sustainable. There are 4 concepts that we need to do for this decade of actions. The first thing is that we need to do something for the high value added and the green economy, right? Because like you know that the economy is not just the same economy as at previous time. The economy will be transformed to the green economy, will be transformed to the high value added economy. So if we have to do for the next, for the near futures, we have to stress on the green and the value added. Some of you might have heard about the global value chains. In the previous times, we focus on the global value chains. At the moment, we now we have the trends to focus on the regional value trends. Okay, that is the things that we need to do. So the first thing, Thailand will focus on the high value added and green economy. And the second one, we're gonna focus on the high opportunity societies. The fourth one is the eco-friendly living. It's about the environment. And the last one is like the enablers, the key enablers for transformations. These 4 dimensions is the things that Thailand will try to drive the countries in the next 5 years. And I think that this is opportunities to use these 13 plans to get the countries toward the sustainability as well. So when we mapped the SDGs and the 13 plan, the milestone in the 13 plans, we can map it completely. Because like you know that when we drive the countries toward the 13 plan, it means that we have to drive the countries toward the sustainability. And the concept of this is like leave the one behind as well. And so that is the opportunity for the countries. And we learn a lot from the previous times, from the many participants mentioned about the data, the informations, that the things. Okay, back to you, Kun Gemma.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I really like how you've demonstrated there. A lot of systematic thinking had gone into the Sustainable Development Goals and linking them through to the 2020, the 20th National Strategic Plan, but also these 4 priority areas. It really showed that you'd done a lot of thinking about how do we not, not only raise awareness of this 2030 agenda with citizens of Thailand, but how do you raise it with your policymakers and your government and the public sector, and embed it in your strategies. And one of our colleagues in the chat has, from Bangladesh, it said, the national strategy on SDG 2017 to 37 is excellent. So wonderful presentation, and thank you very much for sharing that, Kun Tutai. Now I'm moving to our last speaker in this session, who is Dr. Wenxiao Zhu, from the director of the IoT Belt and Road Research Centre at AIT. And like our previous guest from CASA, we're also going to hear about the really valuable role that Big Earth data can play in supporting the Sustainable Development Goals here in Thailand. Dr. Zhu, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gemma. Thank you for a kind introduction. May I share my screen? Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen properly?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And we hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, firstly, thank you very much for the host organizations to provide these very great opportunities for us to share some efforts and experience that we have been working on supporting the national implementation and monitoring of SDGs in Thailand. I'm also very, very happy to learn a lot of exciting progress in monitoring, evaluating, and implementing the SDGs, especially in the national and international levels. So back to our works or focus, actually as a research institution sitting in Thailand. Maybe we provide more of our efforts on the ground-based practice and efforts to support the SDGs in national or even local scale in Thailand. So today I would like to share some of our initial efforts on a recently initiated research project entitled Application of Big Earth Data in Support of SDGs in Thailand. And this work is also kindly supported by the National Research Council of Thailand, and will be conducted in close collaboration with the Digital Belt and Road program. So starting with a very quick view of the national SDG dashboard in Thailand. So this is actually reported based on the Thailand's voluntary national review on the SDG. So we can easily identify that actually 14 out of the 17 goals are still facing different challenges significantly or even major. And some of the challenges are actually related to in formulating the SDG indicators, okay, due to different reasons like lack of statistical expertise or lack of data comprehensiveness or data disaggregations or maybe lack of the feasibility and the sustainability of the indicators and so on. Then in this national report, it was also identified that one of the measures to address these challenges might be to develop or apply some modern science and technologies. Okay, so especially applying the remote sensing and the big data analysis, which are actually quickly developed in recent years and widely applied in the scientific research. So in our recent communication with the National Economic and Social Development Council, we also noticed that the NESDC has the interest in adopting this Big Earth data-based technology to help with the monitoring of the program of SDGs in Thailand. So it's our great pleasure that to provide this kind of research support and to support the national SDG implementations in Thailand. So I think about the Earth observation technology, our previous guest speakers has introduced a lot. So I will just pass this very basic introduction about technology itself. Then come back to our research project. So we are aiming to generate and apply the big Earth data for monitoring and assessing several selected SDG indicators, and then to provide implications for the integration and mainstreaming of technology into the policy towards the implementation of SDG in Thailand, especially in the context of Thailand. Then specifically, our work will aim at generating and using the big Earth data to fill in the missing information and provide new sources of data for the evaluation of several selected SDG indicators, and to apply and conceptualize the new proposed scientific-based methodologies and frameworks to evaluate the SDGs based on this big Earth data technology, and to provide lessons learned from the application of our developed methodologies in several case studies in Thailand, and then to provide the implementations and recommendations for the integration of big data and technology in policy formulation and implementation towards the SDG achievement in Thailand. So as a pilot research project, we initially selected 9 SDG indicators, which based on the wide literature reviews, and we believe that these indicators can be properly addressed by the application of big Earth technology, big Earth observation technologies. So these selected 9 indicators are majorly under 4 SDGs: the SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 14, life below water. So if you record my earlier slides, actually 4 of these SDGs are in the orange and red colors, which means there is a great needs in the national level that we need to provide more data, more information to properly implement these goals. Then the major activity we are going to conduct under this project. So typically include the collection of secondary data from national and local government and organizations, and then to conduct the field data collections, including some field surveys and field sampling events, and also to accurate the Earth observation data based on multiple remote sensing platforms and also data sources, including the data sources provided by DIVA, and then to provide a demonstration of the developed scientific methodologies and frameworks in several selected areas, study areas in Thailand. And then the last but not least, to conduct the stakeholder communication and to transfer our research output with the related agencies and stakeholders. So here I listed some of our expected outputs. So through the implementation of our project, we are aiming to provide the scientifically sound and locally feasible methodologies to evaluate the several selected indicators in this project, and meanwhile to produce the applicable database, data set, and also mapping products, okay, for the related government and organizations to apply. And then we are also aiming to produce the scientific report on using big Earth data to support the SDG monitoring in Thailand. Then we also identified our potential users of our research output, including the NBSDC and also different ministries with, who are looking at different SDG goals. So we hope that our research output can be widely applied in the local and the national level in Thailand, and to support the work. So since our project is quite newly initiated, so and also due to the limited time today, so I would like just have a brief share of some of our initial research outputs. So this is initial outputs of the historical land use and land cover changes in one of the biggest river watershed in Thailand, the Chao Phraya River watershed. And we actually produced the land use, land cover data from late 1980s to current years. And then this information actually can be applied in our future work to evaluate the indicators related to the land use and land cover, like for example, the SDG 11.3, inclusive urbanization and participatory integrated planning, and also like SDG 15.1. And another initiated work, we tried to map the river water quality with the satellite image, and together with the neural network models. And then we calibrated our model with the local informations, and in order to monitor the water quality in the freshwater bodies in Thailand. And actually, we conduct a case study in the BMR region, in the lower river part, in the Chao Phraya River. And also, we conducted some initial research on the spatial and the temporal assessment of the environmental hazard of the soil and sediment in Thailand. And actually, the output from this initial data processing can help us to evaluate several SDG indicators. For example, the SDG 2.4 for land and soil quality, and 6.6 for the water-related ecosystem, and several other potential target indicators like 3.9 and 12.4 or 15.3. So actually, these are very initial works we have started. So we expect further development based on our available data and also our developed methodologies, okay, to provide more support for the SDG evaluation in Thailand, especially for the localized of the implementation and improvement in Thailand. So that's all I would like to share today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Xu. And thank you. It's a really great complimentary presentation there to the Chinese Academy of Science, really showing the value of Earth observations and big Earth data and the technology that's available. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just had 6 really excellent presentations sharing with you lessons, opportunities, experiences, as well as giving us insight into the priority indicators and possible data sources that can be used for monitoring and evaluating Thailand's progress towards the 2030 goals. Again, we're now moving into what I hope will be a really interactive session with you on discussing identifying priority data sources and proxies for SDG indicators. Now, I'm very happy if anyone would like to raise any questions or offer suggestions in the chat box. I'm monitoring the chat box and happy to hear from you. But I thought I'd first of all put some questions to our 6 speakers that just spoke during the previous session. And I'd like to start with Dr. Xu and Professor Jia from the Chinese Academy of Science. And you both spoke about big data and big Earth observations data. And I'd really like to hear from you very briefly, if you like, just very short, like a minute or two. Why do you think big Earth data is important for the SDGs? Professor Zhao, over to you first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think from the very beginning, we recognize that since the release of SDG, the international community are struggling with the data source. Because traditionally, we mostly based on the statistic data available from member states. And very often that is not so compatible. And some country, maybe some data is missing. And for some indicators, totally data is missing because not available in traditional statistic. So Earth observation and big Earth data technology actually offer a new opportunity because they can capture some of the indicators from the space and validate it on the ground. So that's could be a good supplemental to current database. Yeah.
Wonderful, very, very good. Yes, I agree. A good supplementary data source, very comparable. And Dr. Zhu.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma, for the question. I basically agree with Professor Jia. Actually, we work in the same field, and also based on my experience and working on this topic for several years, I also realized that we know that environment is one of the three major dimensions of sustainability. So for the social and economic, our basic approach to get data is through the statistics. But for environment, if we want to get good information and data, we usually need to build a very complicated national environmental monitoring networks, which are actually quite costly. And for many, developing countries, so we are lack of this kind of very good environmental monitoring systems. So then how can we fill this information gap? Then adopting this Earth observation technology may be a good answer to help us fill. Maybe we cannot fill all the information gap. It cannot replace our traditional environmental monitoring activities, but as Professor Jia said, it do provide many useful information to support some of the SDG goals and help us to make a better evaluation of the SDGs. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu. And I'm just going to check in if we still have Dr. Lud Coffins from the United Nations Environment Program. Lud, are you still with us, or Jinhua, are you with us from UN Environment Program?
I'm still here, Gemma.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lud. Lud, you also mentioned Earth observations data in your presentations, but then you also talked about the role of citizen science data for many of the SDGs. Could you also elaborate a little bit more about what the priority data sources, particularly bringing in the citizen science data? Thanks, Lud.
Yes, thank you, Gemma. I think the citizen science data, especially for environment observation, is very important. And there are many examples. For example, BirdLife uses citizen science data to look at biodiversity. But I think what's most important is that there are strict guidelines on how to organize citizen science, because ultimately it has to respond to the same you know, criteria or principle for statistical soundness. So there is a lot of work going on in developing guidelines, for example, on national source inventories, which are very important for marine litter, for countries to develop that. I mentioned in my presentation the use of the cleanup actions. These happen across the world. And so you need very rigorous guidelines to make sure that you get comparable data and that, you know, that you can use the modeling and feed it in with other data for it to be useful. So there is a lot of work ongoing on this, and there is a review process ongoing. So citizen science, yes, but based on specific guidelines that are useful. And it really expands your observation potential for the environment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lud. You actually, in your presentation, also highlighted the importance of credible, reliable, easy to access, robust. You know, you highlighted several criteria there for good data sources. How are you finding the Big Earth observation and the citizen science data? How do you find it stacks up against those criteria in your experience?
I think and it has been mentioned also by other speakers, using geospatial data or Earth observation, I think the main criteria to make sure that your algorithms for interpreting and deciding on what these images represent and develop the statistics from there always is accompanied with ground truthing of the data. So it's always a combination of developing your algorithms, developing through the machine learning, improving your interpretation, but then also cross-checking at each time with, and for example, on the example I gave on 661, so there was really a checking done with a whole archive of pictures taken, photos basically, to really check whether the interpretation was correct. So I think that's one element in Earth observation, and especially because it's happening in different places. And I think there is a whole network where, you know, you can compare and cross-check the results you get.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the cross-checking and ground truthing is particularly important, I think, not only for the Earth observation and citizen science, but also other big data sources like mobile phone data, which a lot of people are interested as well. We have a question just while we're on this topic of citizen science data. I might keep with you for a moment, Lud. In addition to guidelines, don't you also need some form of implementation budget for citizen science for it to be successful? Are you able to comment on your experience with implementation budgets for citizen science data?
Basically, what on our side, we've used citizen science for marine litter. it's project-based, but it's also a partnership. So basically what you get is you start working with different scientific or international organizations to develop this, and by actually combining it, in this case, with the cleaning actions of beach litter, you can have a quite cost-effective way of applying this. But I think, yeah, it's basically being able to show the usefulness and the results that allow you to kind of find the resources to continue doing these exercises.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lud. And we saw there in Dr. Zhu and Professor Zhao's presentation the range of projects that are underway that constantly reinforce the value of this data. Dr. Zhu or Professor Zhao, do you want to comment on the budget, the financing question that one of our audience has put forward? How do you find the cost and budget implications of using Earth observation?
Yeah, I guess Professor Jia is more experienced to answer this question.
Professor Zhao? I think's not here.
He might be there. So let me try to answer. Maybe I cannot properly answer it based on my short experience. But in terms of, from the aspect of actually doing research. So I actually also, working on the traditional environmental science monitoring. So then comparing the financial cost to do the conventional monitoring and comparing with the adopting this observation technologies. Actually, the later option is cheaper than the first option. So it looks like we are adopting very advanced technology, which is supposed to be more expensive or more costly. But in fact, it could be less. Could have less request on the financial or have the stress to the national finance.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Zhu. I think one of the benefits of the Earth observation data is that it's coming from essentially global sources like NOAA, National Observation, the NOAA, and it's collected. Basically, it's brought together and cleansed globally, and so each country does not have to then produce the same data. So some of these global data sources could well be cheaper for national use.
Yeah, actually, there are a lot of free accessible informations and the data sources that can be used by different countries. So in this aspect, maybe it's quite a cheap options. Thank you.
Yes. Let me now turn to the statistical community who are also with us today, and I'm going to bring in my colleague Arman from SCAP. We picking up Lud's comments there from the importance of having credible data sources that are easy to access. They can be cross-checked and ground truth. They're reliable, trusted sources. Arman, could you share with us what I know you worked on what's called global quality assurance guidelines. Can you bring in some discussion what you think are some priority features of data sources that are available for SDG monitoring?
Thank you, Gemma. Actually, the quality assurance framework that was developed, it's a work led by DESA, but many national statistical offices were involved in developing that. And it came after adoption of the SDG indicators by the Statistical Commission. And they have basically managed to update the initial draft based on the data needs for SDG indicators. So it really reflects the quality aspects related to all different types of data, admin data, surveys, new sources of data, or big data. Each of them, of course, have different requirements. We've been talking about big data today. Lots of the obstacles, I would say, in use of big data is because the official statisticians may not feel comfortable using those data because they may not meet certain quality aspects. So the National Quality Assurance Framework tried to somehow identify different aspects such as measurement errors, such as representativeness of the samples, or the disaggregation, the coverage of the target population, or the measurement tools of measurement that are causing the measurement bias, and all of those issues, or sample bias, that is because of the certain tools that are used to collect those data, and not all population groups have access to those. So all of these issues related to big data that have been covered, and certain standards have been developed in case countries wanted to adopt those into their own official frameworks. They could basically use those as a checklist for quality. Of course, there's a lots of quality aspects also related to administrative data, which is different. Of course, they are not the sampling errors are not an issue there, but lots of issues related to frame apply to the admin data in terms of coverage of the population and collection of the data. So what we call NCAF, National Quality Assurance Framework, is very much adopted itself to SDGs, and all countries are encouraged to consider that when they are basically trying to use different sources of data for SDG monitoring.
Thank you very much, Arman. And I'll now turn to Kun Hachinok Kun Eun in the National Statistics Office of Thailand. And Kun Eun, on one of your earlier slides, you spoke about the range of indicators that are being used by Thailand and the range of data sources that are available for Thailand. And I'm just wondering if you could share with us as well, you've identified some priority data sources through that process, things like probably your population census, some of your household and business surveys. Could you share with us some of your views on priority data sources for the SDGs? Kun Eun.
Thank you, Kun Gemma. For me, I think as a statistician, I think all the data source that we familiar with is the traditional data source is a survey data, and I think all the data source are important for using for use as a measuring and monitoring SDG or other indicator in the country. And nowadays, I think we face a problem with the survey data because of we have the very low response rate nowadays. We cannot, even the COVID-19 pandemic, also that we cannot leave the household or the firm. So for the SDG indicator or the data or the statistics for measuring or monitoring of the SDG, I think not only the survey data, but the administrative data also is important for providing the indicator of the SDG indicator. But as Kun Arman said, that the admin data may be face a problem is the coverage of, 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 of the target population. But I think the NSO and the other agency in the NSS of Thailand, I think we could work, and we work also, and we could work together. And the one option of the new data source that all the statisticians know that is the Earth observation or big data technology. I think it is one new data source for some statistics, such as the environmental statistics. But I'm still worried, like Arman said, some quality aspect that. But I think in the next future, the statistics or the statistics office statistician have to go through the not only the traditional source but go through the Earth observation. Thank you, Khun Gemma.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kunun. I'd like to now ask our Kun Tutai, Dr. Tutai, because you're responsible, the NSDC, the council is responsible for my understanding, preparing the voluntary national review report for the Thai government. And I'd just like to get a feel from your point of view of this issue of quality data sources. Like what do you look for when you're looking for a quality data source? If you could reflect on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Khun Gemma. And so for the VNR, the Voluntary National Review, we work closely with MFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we know that we cannot gather all the indicators that mentioned by the UN. So that's why we need to select the indicator to mention in the VNR carefully. So we know that the quality is not perfect, but we try to do our best. For example, if we say that the quality is from the NSO, the National Statistical Office, from the census, and just like the Director Harashnuk just mentioned, if they're from the reliable resource, we use that. But if they're from the survey, for example, it's just like from the something like the adjustment of the policymakers, the scaling that you mentioned in, for example, the SDG 6 or something like that, or SDG 16, that from the adjustment from the policymakers. We try to, we have to investigate, we have to revise about this again before publish anything in the public. So that if you ask me that about the qualities, I say the quality is not perfect, but it's acceptable.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And while we have you there, Dr. Tutai, one of the questions from the chat there is the number of indicators may be implemented but not published, and this might be the gap of data analysis that's not reflected in real implementation. You have to, every government has to make a choice of which indicators and which SDGs they're going to report on, but can you comment here on how you choose which indicators and this issue here of maybe what's published versus what data you do have?
That is interesting one as well. So you can see that it's not published in one website, but actually the SDG indicators are from many agencies. For example, when you want to know about the SDG 1, you have to file from the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of the Human Securities, for example. So what we want to do at the moment, we try to establish one central website for the SDGs. We try to we try to link between the ministries, between the line ministries, and gather the data with the consultation with the NSO. And that is the things we try to publish the SDG indicators. But let me clarify one thing. I just want to insist what Director Anashinok just mentioned. Not all global indicators will be published in the context of Thailand. We need to see the indicators. For example, the first one, we have 247 indicators. And so we need to which indicators that can with the Thailand data, and we set that the priority one. After that, we try to do our best if it's possible to arrange any survey or anything for the data with the consultation with NSO again, and also with considering the metadata in the statistical provided by the UN. And if we can establish the indicators, we set it as the priority 2. And if they cannot do anything about the data, for example, it's not relevant to the Thai context, we make it as the proxy indicators. Right, so we gather priority 1, 2, and 3 altogether. That will be the Thailand SDG indicators.
Wonderful.
Back to you, Cap.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. I've come to the end of the questions that I was going to ask of each of our 6 speakers there, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. If there's any other final words any of you would like to say, please just put on your video. I'm happy to go to you. Otherwise, we might move to the final 2 sessions. I can't see anybody wanting to have any last word.
Maybe if I may,
Sure.
Gemma?
Yes, Lud, yeah.
Yes, I was thinking a bit further on your question of where do you find the resources and the finances for, and I think ultimately it's when the data are used and when they are, so that interaction between the policymaker, other stakeholders, that the data is actually used to inform, for example, circular economy, which is very important for Thailand, reduction of pollution, for climate change. If then the demand will be there for the data, and I think the resources then follow. So to me, that link between policy and science and data and statistics is what actually drives where the resources will go. That was just one last comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lou. That's it's a very good question. We see this a lot through Asia and the Pacific through our work at UNSCAP, that if the data meets the policy needs, then the policy says, I need the data, therefore I'll invest in the data and use that data. So it's it's like a circular data economy, if you like. Policy means the demand, which means the investment. So thank you so much. That's really good insight. I'm now going to move through to a summary and conclusions of this session, which I've managed to put together a very brief PowerPoint. Let me just, if I could just ask the organisers if I could please share my screen here. And bring up my presentation. And unfortunately, I can't see my screen. So if someone could just check that I'm looking good on there, that you can see the screen.
We can see your screen, Gemma. It's the blue screen at the moment. Right.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, just coming to now the final two sessions of this conference, and I just wanted to remind everybody that this conference was about learning and about boosting implementation together. And I'm just going to share with you some conclusions and lessons from Thailand, which I think can be shared regionally and globally from all the wonderful interaction we've had over these two sessions. The conference was set up to meet 5 aims, and I'm going to say that I think we've successfully met these 5 aims. We've raised awareness of stakeholders about the 2030 Agenda and its goals, particularly the follow-up and review mechanisms. We've reviewed the state of Thailand's implementation. We've identified some priority goals for Thailand, data gaps and potential approaches for strengthening follow-up and review, including proxy indicators and sources. We've identified some priority research areas. And we've today very much captured lessons learned from Thailand that can be shared regionally and globally. So if you recall, on day 1, we heard from 6 very good speakers, and we have shown you there on the screen, who introduced the conference, but also in their own way raised the awareness of the situation of SDGs in Thailand. And we heard that the 2030 Agenda, what is it? It is about transforming the world. It's an articulation of 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets. It's an agenda for both developing nations like Thailand as well as developed nations across the world. This is quite different to the Millennium Development Goals. It's a global agenda for people, for peace, for planet, for prosperity, and for partnerships. And it has, the 2030 Agenda has an agreed follow-up and review mechanism that includes voluntary national reviews. And it's country-led. It's country-led, the voluntary national review process, and has a 15-year timeframe from 2016 through to 2030. Now, in terms of the follow-up and review mechanism, if you read the actual 2030 Agenda, it's very clear that governments have primary responsibility for voluntary national, for follow-up and review. That these follow-up and reviews need quality, accessible, timely and reliable, as well as disaggregated data. And that a wide range of data, including Earth observation data, is needed to be able to track progress. And we're going to need public-private partnerships in order to do that. We heard on day 1, and I was really pleased that Kun Tutai, Dr. Tutai repeated here today, the learnings from Thailand. Thailand has an SDG roadmap, and it has these 6 areas. And this conference actually has really helped us understand the need to raise awareness, aspects of the monitoring evaluation, the partnerships there. And we also heard about the localization and SDG implementation. Some of the major findings from the report that were presented last week was that in Thailand, how much progress has Thailand made since 2000? And using a measurement approach that we have developed at UNSCAP, we see as of now, based on the data, the global data that's available for Thailand, we are not on track in Thailand to, at present, to meet any of the goals. But 2 goals in particular, no poverty and industry, innovation and infrastructure, goal 9, we're doing reasonably well on. Many of the other goals we're making progress, but not sufficient. We aren't hitting that black bar in the middle that says we're on track. And unfortunately, for a couple of goals for zero hunger and climate action, as well as life below water, we're going in the wrong direction. If we continue business as usual, will Thailand achieve its targets by 2030? And for some targets, with some of the 169 targets, we will, and we need to maintain progress to achieve those. But for many others, we need to accelerate or reverse the current trends. So for goal 2, we need to accelerate in many areas: undernourishment, food security, sustainable agriculture. We need to reverse trends around malnutrition and investment in agriculture. Under goal 6, similar pattern, we need to accelerate in 3 areas. We need to reverse trends in 2. For goal 12, we need to maintain progress for fossil fuel subsidies, but we need to accelerate or reverse trends in many areas. And for goal 13, climate action, we need to reverse trends for resilient and adaptive capacity for climate change policies. And unfortunately, we just don't have any data to monitor progress on climate change awareness, UNFCCC commitments, and climate change planning and management here in Thailand. For goal 16, which also was identified as a priority, we have to maintain progress on a couple of targets: accelerating one, corruption and bribery, reverse some trends around human trafficking and justice for all. But this goal also has some real data challenges for it. We heard a roadmap from international organisations, private sector, academia, civil society organisations, an excellent presentations, excellent discussion from our speakers last week from each of these sectors. And we asked them, what did they think are the priority goals for Thailand? And in terms of summarising our speakers, all 4 sectors identified climate action as a key priority goal for Thailand. 3 of the sectors identified these 3 goals: goal 14, life below water; goal 16, peace, justice and strong institutions; and goal 17, partnership for the goals. 2 of the sectors identified reduced inequalities, responsible consumption and production, and goal 15, life on land. And our speakers also identified these 6 other goals here that are shown on the right-hand side. So across all of the 17 goals, our keynote speakers from day one identified 15 of the 17 goals as a priority for Thailand. We also invited you to share with us what you thought were the priority sustainable development goals for Thailand, and we gave you the option of identifying up to 5 priority goals. And these were the results from our audience on day one. And you'll see here that the top 5 SDGs that were identified were for goal 3, good health and well-being; goal 10, reduced inequalities; and goal 13, climate action. So similar to our keynote speakers, goal 13 was identified as a key priority for Thailand. We also, you also identified quality education as a priority, and you also identified responsible consumption and production, as well as no poverty, as a priority. The 5 goals listed on the right-hand side of this screen are similar to those that were identified by our keynote speakers from the private sector, public sector, civil society, and research and academic sector. But you also identified goal 1, no poverty, as a priority for Thailand. Now, today we've had a discussion on identifying priority data sources and proxies for the SDGs and the indicators. And I'd just like to share with you a bit of a summary of what we've heard today. To preface this, though, we need to understand what is the data availability challenge that is being faced in Thailand. And one of our speakers, Arman from SCAP, shared with us that for the global data, we've got sufficient data to measure 130 of the global SDG indicators, around 56%. insufficient data for 35 indicators or 15%, and no data in Thailand for 66 of the indicators or 29% of the 231. And we heard that these span across all of the different goals shown here across the goals, but the 3 goals in particular where data availability is a challenge for Thailand are Goal 5, gender equality, Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, and Goal 14, life below water. These are the 3 goals, if I look at the global database, where we have the least data available to monitor progress on the 2030 agenda in Thailand. Now, if I blend those priority goals that our audience and our guest speakers from day one shared with us, which is on the left-hand side, with the 3 goals where we have insufficient data in Thailand to monitor progress, Goal 5, 11, and 14, you'll see that 2 of the goals, Goal 5 and Goal 14, are both a priority goal for Thailand, as well as a goal where we have the least data available. So this is sort of highlighting where should we be putting, not only are they a priority goal for us in Thailand, but also an area where we need to make some investment in data. And today we've heard from our speakers many very valuable points about possible data sources, priority data sources for the goals. We've heard about the official censuses and surveys that are conducted by the Thai National Statistics Office, and also the Thai National Statistics Office, and we heard from NESDC as well about the important role of administrative data that comes from administrative systems in Thailand, like birth registration data, death registration data, that can be used as a data source for the SDGs. We've also heard opportunities to use other data sources, and I do know that in Asia and the Pacific, including Thailand, there is a lot of interest in big digital data sources like mobile phone data. And we've heard today the real potential of big Earth observation data, as well as citizen science data. All of our speakers, though, all 5 of our speakers today highlighted the challenge about the data sources need to support disaggregation. And this is particularly important if you go, the follow-up and review mechanisms for the 2030 agenda call for disaggregation by 10 different types of disaggregation, men and women, age groups, urban, rural, disability, ethnicity. There's a whole range of different disaggregation. And as we heard from Kun Hatchinok from the National Statistics Office, if we're running sample surveys, these can be very difficult for producing disaggregated data. And we also heard that some of our data sources, like population census, are only conducted every 10 years. So the availability and timeliness of these data sources, even if they support disaggregation, the data might be out of date or does not change and not support monitoring over a 15-year agenda. So this is where the opportunities to use big digital data, big Earth observation and citizen science data not only can produce more timely and more frequent data, but also can support disaggregation for the Sustainable Development Goals. However, as we've all just heard, it's very important that these data sources are relevant, that they're accepted, they're acceptable, they're credible, easy, robust, and that come from reliable, trusted sources. And many of you also, we heard today, many spoke about the importance of being comparable across countries so that the statistics and the data that comes from these data sources is comparable across countries. And so these big 6 pieces, so these were the priority indicators and data sources. But our speakers also were invited to share with us their identifying opportunities and share with us lessons that can be shared from Thailand regionally and globally. And I'd just like to capture some of them here, and my apologies if I'm missing some of the lessons and opportunities which you've heard. So from our National Statistics Office of Thailand and from the Council, NESDC, some of the experiences from Thailand was the importance of embedding the 2030 agenda and the SDG indicators into the National Strategic Plan at all levels, at the national, provincial, local level. We heard about the importance of raising awareness of the agenda, and that this also needs improving at all levels, but it features in the 20-year plan, as we heard from Kuntutai. The 2030 agenda also needs a data ecosystem. It needs modern tools like SDMX to enable the data transfer and the efficient use of that data, and a data catalogue to understand what data do we have here in Thailand, what can be used, where is it available, what's its quality. Now, we all might think that SDG data availability in Thailand at 56% isn't very good, and 6 years into the agenda, you could argue that it isn't very good, but 56% is still pretty good relative to many other countries in the region. And we heard from SCAP there that for some countries in our region, they may only have 10 or 20% of the SDG indicators with data availability. So Thailand's pretty good relative to others, but still has some room for improvement to increase data availability. And to be able to do this, coordination between all the stakeholders is essential, and good governance. And we saw the governance mechanisms on several of the slides there today that are available in Thailand to support the follow-up and review processes. Now, from our research sector today, we heard from the Digital Belt and Road Science Committee and from the AIT about the really valuable data source that's available to us. Big Earth data can be used as the source for many of the SDG indicators. Really looking forward to this launch of an international centre for Big Earth data later this year. And the research sector, the Thai research sector, are researching the use of Earth observations for specific SDG indicators. And this experience from the Thai research sector is something which we should be able to share, not only here at this conference, but regionally and globally. And finally, from our colleagues at SCAP and the Environment Program, proxy indicators and supplementary indicators, they're fine to use. There is a global SDG indicator framework, but as we heard, proxy indicators can be used. Supplementary indicators are being used, and so it's fine if Thailand does want to use these. We also heard the importance of having a voice, Thailand having a voice at forums like the Interagency Expert Group on SDG indicators, so that tools that are developed by our UN partners reflect Thailand's needs. And we also heard again stressing the importance that these data sources are credible, they're comparable, they're ground truthed in the case of the Earth observations, that ground truth, and that we have good coverage of the population for these data sources. We need to provide data statistics for Thailand, so we need good coverage of all population groups, all areas of Thailand for them to be used and usable. Now, some of the research questions which I picked up today, and again, this is a very initial list of what I heard, and I'm really looking forward to our colleagues there at NC, the National Research Council of Thailand, and all of our partners for this event to make sure that we've captured these. But some of the research priorities which I captured today were the Thailand social and economic transformation that we heard from Dr. Tutai from the NESDC, and the 4 priority areas there of high value added and green economy, eco-friendly living, high opportunity society, and the key enablers. And he gave a very good slide there that can break these down further, for instance, circular economy. One of the areas that we heard from the National Statistics Office was the compilation of a data catalogue. And, you know, I think here is a real research priority to understand what data does exist for Thailand and what can it be used for. And I know the National Stats Office is working on that. The research around proxy indicators, we heard, for instance, from UN Environment Programme about how some countries are using beach debris as a proxy for ocean plastic debris. This might be something Thailand would like to do. I know Thailand's very, you know, pollutants and plastic debris is a big issue, policy issue for Thailand. So this might be an area of research. Also, supplementary indicators, you know, should they be used for Thailand? What could be considered a priority for supplementary indicator? Further research around the role of big Earth data and citizen science data for filling the data gaps is also a research priority. But as we heard, it's important to have strict guidelines on how to use these data sources to ensure it's comparable, it's suitable for modeling, it can be integrated with other data sources, it's trusted, it's credible, but definitely a role of big Earth data and citizen science data. The importance of regional comparability of Thai proxy and supplementary indicators came up in one of our speakers today. Particularly as you saw, actually it was in the Kun Hatchinok's presentation where she showed that Thailand is part of the ASEAN, and there is a lot of work that goes into looking at Thailand's results compared to other ASEAN member states. So this regional comparability, if Thailand is to adopt proxy and supplementary indicators, making sure that there's some regional comparability, I think would be an important aspect of that research question. And we also heard today from UN SCAP about research around research underway already around assessing and visualizing Thailand's progress, not only for raising awareness with citizens, with the public here today at this conference, but also for the voluntary national review report that will be presented to the high-level political forum later this year. So coming to this final aim of this conference was to share Thailand's experiences and I'd really like to highlight the comment that was made by our guest from UN Environment, that it's important to have Thailand's voices heard. And I think there's several areas where Thailand's voice is already being heard and can be heard. At the UN, globally at the UN high-level political forum this year, Thailand's voluntary national review will be presented. And I'm also aware that quite a lot of work on data and statistics, and I've had the pleasure of being at events with Kun Hatchinok from the National Stats Office to share Thailand's experience at the International Statistics Institute World Statistics Congress that was held in Malaysia in 2019. So I think Thailand's voice is being heard globally, at least at these two forums. Regionally, I've already mentioned ASEAN. There is an ASEAN leaders meeting that's held annually. There's also an ASEAN Community Statistical System meeting that's held annually towards the end of the year. And some of those results you heard here today from Kun Hatchinok from the National Stats Office are shared at this. And at the ASEAN leaders meeting this year, SDG 14, Life Below Water, will be a particular focus. So this is an opportunity, given life below water is a priority for Thailand. This is also an opportunity for Thailand to have a voice at this ASEAN leaders meeting later this year. And UN SCAP hold a regular series called the Asia Pacific Stats Cafe that shares lessons learned from across the region. And the Thai National Statistics Office, we regularly invite Kun Hatchinok to present at this Asia Pacific Stats Cafe. And we've also had the pleasure actually of the Chinese Academy of Sciences also sharing their work on big Earth observations. And this promotes the work of Thailand in our region. Finally, nationally, this conference has been, I think, a resounding success of raising the awareness of what is happening in Thailand with a multitude of stakeholders. And I'd like to really thank our organisers and Kun Montip for having this suggestion of holding this conference. We also heard on session 1 about how some voluntary local reviews are underway in 9 pilot sites across Thailand with the support of the UN Development Programme. And I think these are opportunities to share Thailand's lessons, to boost implementation, and to share with your citizens what's happening with the 2030 Agenda. And then I've just put the quote there from one of our guests who is part of this audience here today from Bangladesh, who really took the time there to say that Thailand's national strategy on SDG 2017 to 2037 is an excellent example of raising awareness, embedding the SDGs into Thailand's national strategic plan, and identifying priority goals and priority monitoring, evaluation, follow-up and review. So with that, I'd like to finish this session and move through to the closing. With that, maybe I'll hand back to you, Dr. Montip, to proceed to the closing. Thank you very much.
Closing session of the conference. Professor Mario Tabukanan will moderate this session.
Thank you very much. My name is Mario Tabukanan. I am affiliated with the United Nations University and AIT, and I'm honored to be the moderator for this session. First of all, I would like to thank Jima for the excellent summary of conclusions and lessons learned, and also for moderating 3 sessions today. We owe you a lot, Jima, your contribution to this conference, and also for your presentation last week on the progress in Asia-Pacific region on the SDGs. All good things come to an end, so we have to conclude this conference. The 2 sessions that we have had have been fascinating. I think we learned and we achieved the objectives of the conference. To conclude this conference, we have 3 speakers that we would like to have the honor to speak. And the first one, I'm privileged to call on Ms. Jima van Halderen again. It's not over yet, Jima. Director of the Statistics Division of UNESCAP, to deliver her closing remarks. Over to you, Jima.
Thank you very much. And look, I will be very quick here because I think you've heard a lot from me today. I would just like to, on behalf of UNESCAP and my team, really like to thank everybody for joining us over these last 2 weeks, two sessions. I'd like to first of all thank Dr. Montip for having this suggestion of holding a conference, and the real value of the National Research Council of Thailand. The National Research Council bringing together all of the research sector together like this, I think it's been extremely valuable. I personally have learned a lot. I do hope that this conference is boosting implementation. It was very important that we boosted implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I'd like to thank all of the speakers for putting really great presentations together and sharing their insights. There's a lot that Thailand can offer, and there's a lot that Thailand is already offering, not only nationally, but regionally through my institution, UNESCAP, and also globally at the events that I attend globally with Thailand. They are an active contributor. So it's really great that we've brought together all the stakeholders to hear. So with that, let me, I think it's best if we hear from other people because I've really dominated today. So thank you very much for this opportunity to partner with you. And it's been a real pleasure meeting you and being in this 2-day event. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jima, for your inspiring words. And NESDC is a very important agency in Thailand with regard to the planning and implementation of the SDG framework. And we have the honor to have Dr. Thai, who has been with us for 2 sessions. In the first session, he gave an opening on behalf of NESDC, and we heard from him again today. And also, it's not over yet, Dr. Thai. You have one more, and this is to hear from you your concluding remarks on behalf of NESDC. Dr. Thai.
Thank you very much, Professor Mario. On behalf of NESDC, we'd like to thank Dr. Montip for initiating and organizing and do everything for this kind of events. And so I think it's very useful and interesting. And I also like to thank Kun Gema for moderating many sessions for these 2 days. And I also would like to thank our distinguished speakers and the participants as well, because you contribute a lot to the sessions, and the SDC as the government agencies learn a lot from these two sessions. And so we will use this the conference results, the meeting results as the input to drive the countries toward the SDGs. Okay, back to you, Professor.
Now I have the pleasure to call on Dr. Montip Siratana, who is the convener of the conference, organizer and convener of the conference. She is Director of Digital Belt and Road International Center of Excellence, based at the National Research Council of Thailand. And she would be giving her final remarks at this conference.
Thank you very much. I'm privileged to have the last word. First and foremost, what is next after this conference? So the outcome and lesson learned from the conference will provide some guidance to partner organizations working together in pursuit of SDG implementation in Thailand, and in sharing lessons and learning cases regionally and globally. So on behalf of the Digital Belt and Road International Center of Excellence, DIBA, ICOE Bangkok, National Research Council of Thailand, I express profound gratitude to the conference co-organizers of NRCT, namely UNESCAP, UN Thailand, and collaborators, namely DIBA, NESDC, Mahidol University, and the Asian Institute of Technology, which provided excellent technical support. I thank all the speakers, modulators from the co-organizing and collaborating organizations, as well as from UNDP, UNEP, UN Global Compact Thailand, Sustainable Development Foundation, and the National Statistics Office Thailand. Thank you so much. To all participants, both sessions, we are profoundly grateful for joining us, and we do hope that you will join us again in our future offerings. We will see you then, and thank you all very much. The conference is now adjourned. I wish you all stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and distinguished participants. The National Conference on Thailand and the SDGs, Learning and Boosting Implementation Together, has ended. Wishing you all well, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.